Welcome to Are We the Only Ones? I'm Kathy, and today I want to talk about Davos. What a change of events in terms of Canada coming out. I don't want to say guns blazing, but like metaphorically, guns blazing, saying middle powers in the global geopolitical world need to reassess the way that it's been in the G7 slash G8, and that they have enough power in the global integration to be able to have more autonomy. If they bond or collaborate and form a coalition with other middle powers, and I'm sure some first world powers would actually join as well, they would no longer need any allies that would essentially abuse their power by using global integration and weaponizing the economic, I want to say actually sort of like the economic equity that those giant global powers have enjoyed. And the global power that Canada is speaking about is the neighbor to the south, my country, the United States of America. Look, is it hard to hear that the country that you live in, the one that you have pledged your allegiance to as a child and then as an adult, for me, especially as somebody who was a part of the military community for a decade, to hear the world, to hear our neighbor to the north, who was like jokingly referred to as the nicer USA, is now being, I wouldn't say forced, but it was the third standing ovation in the history of the UN. First was Nelson Mandela. Second was President Zelensky. And now the Prime Minister of Canada. So I have been feeling that eventually it was going to be sort of like a James Bond movie. Except instead of it being a German accent that was the bad guys, it was eventually going to be the American accent that was going to be the bad guys. And I think that time may have come. We have to prepare ourselves to see, as Americans, that for the next maybe 10, 20 years, when there's a movie and it's a bad guy, that accent will be ours. Or maybe it'll be, I don't know if they'll make it as like obvious as the crooked Donald Trump accent, but they could, I mean, that'd be even more fair, right? Because I think the world knows that Americans are fighting against, I want to say the Americans, right? Like, it's really the people that feel like the normal civilized economic structure that America has created and then exported to the world, that has successfully been integrated in and had worked for so long, is now under question. And the big looming change that they had to understand in the global economy and the world leaders had to finally understand was, can we allow this to happen again? Can we allow a system that we have set up that enjoys a certain amount of hypocrisy towards the largest governments and powers? Can it still exist if those powers actually do abuse their authority and then turn their weapon systems onto smaller allies? That is the question that we've all been sort of waiting to see if anybody's going to ask it. It's obvious somebody had to pose this. It's obvious this had to happen, because you can't have a system in which people are making deals and then lying or reneging or committing fraud in those deals, and then have a system that can build infrastructure. Perfect example is the Brightline rail, high-speed rail from Las Vegas to California is going to be delayed for another year. And I've been very invested in this project for a lot of different reasons. One is because I worked in traffic engineering when the original Japanese maglev engineers came over to talk to the maglev team in the United States. I helped sort of introduce in just that meeting, just kind of welcome the Japanese engineers. And that was in like 2000. Then I lived in Japan and I got to enjoy the bullet trains and their system. I come back to the United States and I live in New York and I get to enjoy the public transportation in New York, even though it's not as beautiful as Japan's, it's not as clean, it's not as well functioned, it's not as on time. They don't serve food on the trains like they do in Japan, but it is the best transportation system that is available to the public in all of the United States. It runs every 2-3 minutes. You will get the next train that you need. So I enjoyed what that brought to the infrastructure, what that brought to people looking for jobs or people that needed to get work, but you don't have to have a car. You can still have upward mobility in New York to a certain extent in terms of getting work and getting to work. Now, then I moved to LA and then I recognized how hard it is out here without a public transportation system. Now, when the Brightline got announced from Las Vegas, I thought this could actually work because the Brightline in Florida got built successfully and run successfully, and the people in Florida are happy with that Brightline. That Brightline was supposed to go to Disney World, but it didn't end up going to Disney World, but it still goes down to Miami from Orlando as well, and it goes really fast, and it's successful and consistent. So when the Brightline announced that they were going to open a high-speed rail from Las Vegas to California, I had high hopes. But the fact that it has delayed a year, this speaks to the overall. Anytime you have any kind of government situation where you promise people something, and there's a lot of money and funding, so there's really no reason for it not to go through, and it fails again, to the point where there's no trust and belief that it can actually occur, you have a failure in every single step of leadership in that process. So for the most part, living in a democratic state has always worked well. But I can see that this is the one thing that can be a problem. But that is the same problem that we're facing in the overall larger government, which is a government that promises something, takes money for it, and then does not deliver it. Except they've replicated it over and over again. So in terms of, I decided I'm going to start calling crooked Donald Trump the name whenever I talk about him because of how he coined that. And even though it was untrue, it stuck. At least if we're going to speak in truths now, let's use the words that he has used. Let's use the language that they are accustomed to and mirror that language. So the fact that crooked Donald Trump had to go to Davos, sit with the Italian prime minister, and talk to the press, and the fact that she said, "Oh, I don't talk to my press. I don't like to talk to my press." He said, "Oh, I have no problem talking to my press." And she's like, "Well, I never take any questions." Other reporters in the United States said, "Well, of course he loves to take questions and talk to the press because he's never held accountable for all the lies he tells. He says that he's healthy. He's not healthy. He says the economy's healthy. He's not healthy." So how many times has he said he's going to do something? The $2,000 tax rebate refund checks coming in, that didn't happen. We're waiting on a 10% interest rate on credit cards for the cap. So far, that hasn't happened. And now I've heard something about the possibility that he will open up mental institutions again and asylums to help with all the people that were thrown out in the Reagan years when they shut down all of the funding for mental health and everybody had to go on the street. So that's why we have a mental health crisis of the homeless population because of that. So what we're looking at now is the possibility of such a low bar that anything he does is considered such a big deal when it's not. When he's created all of these problems, we are now at a point where when we're looking at the measles kind of rating that we have in the United States. We used to be known as a country who had eradicated measles. Because we have 12 months of continued infections of measles, we are now on the precipice of no longer being called and recognized as a country that has eradicated measles. This is a direct result of crooked Donald Trump putting RFK Jr. into the head of the Health and Human Services. So we know who directly is responsible. And I think what's happening now is that what we're so used to being this bubble of America that we just think like it's only our news. We're only listening to our news. We only have our opinions. And like every once in a while, international opinion will permeate and penetrate into American society, but it doesn't do enough to actually hold anybody really to the fire. But now at Davos, with the whole world reporting this speech with the third ever standing ovation, you can't ignore the truth that that prime minister stated at the World Economic Forum. So we will see what happens in the next few days. Dr. Vandana Arcot actually is on her way to Switzerland. She is going to be at Davos as well. So it will be interesting to hear what she has to say when she comes back. But it was interesting because I also saw Professor Galloway was podcasting, reporting, posting from Davos. And it was very interesting to hear him say that it felt like high school. It felt like a very high school dynamic, which I can see how that would be. But he did say that he was very appreciative when Governor Gavin Newsom came over and recognized him and gave him a big hug and said, "What's up, buddy?" So that made him feel better. So that was a very interesting thing to hear as Professor Galloway being somebody who is of pretty well-known repute in the podcasting world. And he's a professor at NYU. And actually he was Professor Dr. Vandana Arcot was also a student of Professor Galloway. So to hear him say at Davos that he sort of felt this like a low amount of insecurity humanized all of them to me. That no matter how big and bold and badass and billionaire you get, there is always a hint of feeling like a little boy in high school that will always remain, no matter how much power and wealth you leverage. And that's a lesson for all of us to understand that at the end of the day, we all want to be accepted, we all want to be seen, and we all want to be respected for the work that we do and applauded. No matter how famous, rich, powerful you get, you always want that. So something to reflect on for all of us in the next few days to see how everything unfolds. All right. Tell me what you think. Do you think that this speech makes a difference in the world stage in terms of the fact that is it good that we will be almost put on timeout? Right? Are we the only ones that think America needs to be on timeout? Tell me what you think. Until next time. Bye.